Interviewed my buddy and
Oops, hold on.
yeah, go ahead.
Good morning. It's Monday morning, and thankfully the heat has broken. It is gorgeous here. I was actually almost cold this morning when I went out for my ride. I am Ann Brennan. This is ASMM Digital Small Business Connections, and we're the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. But in a few short weeks, when you come back, we will be marketing moms, and we're going to really dig into marketing and what you should know for your small business. Not just the stuff. So many people are like, throw an ad at it. We're going to talk to you about branding, about finding your audience, about what exactly you should do, when you should post, and how you should post. So stay tuned for that. Until then, we've got great guests on the show. Each of them is an entrepreneur. Each of them has something to give you that you can walk away with for your business. My goal every week is to give you something that makes you want to call the COO of your business and say, oh my gosh, we need to start doing this. And today, I think we're really going to have that because so many of us are worried. We're worried about all of the ransom problems you're hearing for cybersecurity right now. We're worried about the security in our businesses. And I don't think it matters which businesses, but I have been thinking a lot about doctors' offices lately. I've been thinking a lot about e-commerce sites. I've been thinking a lot about this because I think small businesses aren't really prepared for it. So I've got a guest today who's going to talk to us about cybersecurity, what we need to know, and what we can do to help ourselves protect ourselves. So it's Scott Schober. He's from BVS Systems. He's going to talk to us about cybersecurity, and I got all distracted because I said that wrong. Tell me the name of your company, Scott.
Sure. You could say BVS for short, but it's Berkeley Varitronics Systems. It's a mouthful.
It is. What is Varitronics?
Yeah, it's an interesting story, actually. We're a 49-year-old company. It was founded by my father, so I'm actually second generation. And Berkeley comes out of Berkeley Heights, New Jersey, where Bell Labs is and many of the innovation. And then Varitronics is kind of a play on the words various electronics and systems. And over the years, we've integrated a lot of different electronics and systems with a key focus to wireless and then, of course, security and cybersecurity, which has really been our focus for the past 10 to 15 years.
Actually, I'm going to say something that you said various electronics, and it just occurred to me, gosh, probably 2 years ago, I was talking to a cybersecurity person, and he said, oh yeah, he says, if you use that Wi-Fi at Starbucks, where they haven't changed the password for 10 years, people are sitting in the parking lot and they can look at what you're doing. And that was the scariest thing to me. So now I never use public Wi-Fi.
Yeah. And that actually is very true. What they're actually doing, what's termed in the industry of cybersecurity, it's called a man-in-the-middle attack. So if you think about your home wireless network, you have an access point. What they do is, in a sense, fool you. They will mimic what Starbucks access point is, and they'll actually host it. And now your phone or your laptop or your tablet, whatever you're using there at Starbucks, will associate to what it thinks is an authorized free public Wi-Fi, but it's actually a cyber criminal. So all the traffic that goes through that, they have access to. And that means all content. So think about whatever you're typing on your laptop, whatever you're browsing, if you go to your bank or your stock market portfolio, you're sending emails, they're performing a man-in-the-middle attack where they can basically collect and surveil and do whatever they want with that. So it's extremely dangerous. And yet every single day, people will use free public Wi-Fi. In fact, your smartphone, it will remember the access point it associated with last time. So once you do it at Starbucks, if you go there every single day to get your cup of Joe there, your phone will automatically associate to it. So you're not even thinking about it. So a year or two later, if it's that hacker that just set up an access point right next door or in the parking lot, guess what? They're collecting all your information on a regular basis. And then they have a channel to actually get into your smart device, could place malware, which what do? You go home and naturally your smartphone is probably going to associate to your home Wi-Fi router. And perhaps with this COVID and remote working, perhaps you connect in remotely to your company. So again, now there's another conduit to get into the network at your business. So you could start to see how hackers have many channels, many conduits to get into the network. And once they get in, usually they sit quietly and they work laterally and start eavesdropping and looking and listening and collecting information before they move in and perform a ransomware attack, maybe compromise personal information, wire transfer fraud, steal credit cards. The sky's the limit. That's the problem. So something as simple as what you just mentioned there, using free Wi-Fi, open at a Starbucks or an airport or anywhere else, could be catastrophic.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
It is really terrifying. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, that was 2 years ago. Who have I hired in between? Because I came home after that and I told the people who were working for me at the time, don't do this anymore. And now it occurs to me, I'm not sure I've told new employees, don't do this anymore. Mm-hmm. So yes, that's very scary.
Yeah, it is scary. And it's not Starbucks to blame or anyone else. The problem is the Wi-Fi standard, which was created by the IEEE many, many years ago, wasn't really built around security. Cyber criminals look at anything, and when they see that there's vulnerabilities that they could easily exploit, they're going to do that. The standard is out there, so the communication means for 2.4 and 5.8 gigahertz, it's everywhere. There's billions and billions of smartphones and home devices and our car. Everything communicates via Wi-Fi now. It's normal and it's great. It's convenient. However, they're exploiting the fact that there are known vulnerabilities in there, and people don't set up their networks properly. They don't set up encryption. You should set up with WPA2 or WPA3 encryption at least. You shouldn't broadcast your SSID. That's the friendly ID that you call your access point. That would say Starbucks free Wi-Fi. So little tiny tricks like that you shouldn't be doing to keep your own information safe. And again, as you point out, it's dangerous to connect into those. What can you do instead is what I always like to point out. Well, if you have a 4G LTE phone or soon to be 5G phone, you can basically host your own hotspot. So say you go to Starbucks, you can take your phone, host a hotspot, and use your laptop and connect in with it. That's easy. Yeah, you're paying for it from a cellular data standpoint, but you create the long, strong password. You can make sure you set it up and configure it with proper encryption, and then you're absolutely safe. No one's going to be able to easily hack into that smartphone or your Wi-Fi connection that you have between your laptop and your smartphone.
That is really great advice. And I was going to ask that, whether you could use the hotspot. And that reminds me to make sure that we are paying each of our employees for those hotspots so that they're covered. Thank you. That's really great advice. Well, let's talk about that. So we have employees for the past year. Most of them have been working at home. And now, actually, it's almost scarier now because the world is opening up. They're still saying they're working from home, but they've got that opportunity of going out. So what are the things that we should know as small business owners about the remote work?
I think if you look at all the major breaches, and this goes back over the past 10 years, and you focus in and you analyze them, there's one commonality that I see in all of them. I call it the human factor. Humans tend to be trusting. They tend to be lazy or complacent when it comes to basic cybersecurity practices. And what that fundamentally means is that we're going to all be lazy when it comes to creating passwords and managing passwords. It's just human nature. Nobody likes to remember something longer than a phone number, right? 7 to 10 digits, it's really hard to remember. Now, when you throw in letters and obscure symbols and things, something that we can't remember well, we're not going to do it. So we're going to gravitate toward password 1, 2, 3, 4, or your pet's name or something else that's easy to remember and easy to hack. So the question I always have for people is, what do you do about it? Well, you got to create a long and strong password, and you need to be disciplined, especially small business owners. I had to learn this the hard way. And I have a combination system that I personally use for very secure sites that I have to access. I actually write them down. It sounds old-fashioned. It sounds cryptic. It is. But I write them down. I keep them in a little notebook that's locked in a safe, locked in an office, locked in a building with cameras and alarms and everything else. So what do? I approach it by old school technology, writing it pen and paper, but I use layers of security. It's really hard to break through those layers of security to have access to my passwords. Now,
Right.
when I'm traveling and I need to have access to passwords that are not the same level of security, I use a password manager, Dashlane for myself. I find that very effective. It's good. And there are many good password managers out there. And all you have to remember is that one really long, strong master password to get access to all of your passwords. I'm managing over 200 passwords. You just can't remember them all, and you can't write them all down on sticky notes and keep them in books. That's just bad cyber hygiene. So I really encourage people to investigate, do your research, and get a good password manager and implement it today. You can get rid of all
Yes.
those sticky notes and other things. And then really the next aspect that's probably one of the most important is never, ever, ever reuse the same password across multiple sites. So if I'm logging into Facebook today and I say, well, I've got nothing to hide on there, and I use Scott Schober as my username and password 1234, but now I get lazy and I use that same password for my bank account and other things, that is a no-no. And still, more than 50% of all small business users are reusing the same password across multiple sites. That is a big, big problem that needs to be addressed. And then finally, regarding passwords, which is a subject that's near and dear to me, and I can't stand passwords, but I have to talk about them all the time. Use multi-factor authentication. In other words, add another layer of security in there, because what happens? Otherwise, you're trading convenience for security or security for convenience. I'd rather take a little bit more time, add that additional layer of security in there with multi-factor authentication to make sure I'm not going to be the victim of a breach, no matter where I'm accessing, especially on those free email programs, the Gmail and Yahoo email and all those other things. You're giving away something. You're consciously giving away. When you use free email, you're giving them, whether you realize it or not, the access to the content and your contacts inside of that email. That's a concern for small business owners.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a good point. It's something most people don't think about. We see a lot of people who use, especially small business owners, Gmail and Yahoo. I had one use Hotmail the other day. I did not even know it was still around, which complete surprise for me. So, but yeah, I think it is one of the things that I say to people about the password vaults is, at the very least, it takes the stress out. Right? Because people get so worked. You've watched it. You ask a business owner for their password for something, and they get this panicked look on their face, like they're never going to remember it. Unfortunately, they do remember it, usually because they've used the same password over and over again.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's huge. And when I present, and I present often to mostly security crowds, and I would think that they would know better than anyone else. And I usually pose that question. I say, hey, let's get an honest survey here. Raise your hand if you reuse your password across more than one login site when you're logging into bank and this and that, Facebook. And usually more than half the audience sheepishly kind of does this and looks around to see if they're going to be identified. What does that tell you? If people that are in the business know the risks, these are cybersecurity practitioners and researchers and experts, and they're not doing it, how's the average business owner going to do it and be disciplined enough to do it? Well,
exactly.
It just doesn't make sense. So something has to be fixed with the system. But until that happens, there are best practices that I think all business owners should do. I learned the hard way. When my business was targeted a number of years ago and hacked, and I had everything. I had credit card, debit card, Twitter was hacked, received repeated DDoS attacks, distributed denial of service where your website is flooded with traffic, so we couldn't do online commerce. And then I had $65,000 stolen out of our checking account, became a federal investigation, paperwork, chaos. What did I learn? I learned passwords are the fundamental thing that usually is the problem. So proper training, how employees can issue passwords and manage them and keep them secure. That's probably the one thing that is in your control that most people aren't doing. So
Right.
we really need to educate. So important within a business.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm hoping that just going to put this in here. I'm hoping Amanda is watching this and she'll pull that little password section right out of here. And let's put that up separately on our social media, because it is so true. It is really true that we all do that. So let me ask you another question. So small businesses think they're not going to target me. right? They're not going to target me because I'm just a small business. It's not like I'm Target. Is that true?
Well, that's what I used to think. We're a small business, 49-year-old company. Now, we do focus in the world of security, cybersecurity. So I think what happened is the more I educate people, the more I put a target on my back. But I'll tell you what, the thing that scared me, and this was really what encouraged me to write my second book, Cybersecurity is Everybody's Business. At one point, I started to get a lot of phone calls from other business owners and business colleagues that I had over the years. And they're saying, Scott, I got this strange malware on my computer. One of the employees clicked on a phishing attack. It looks like we were hit with ransomware. What do I do? And that didn't happen once. I'm getting a call about once a month from business owners. And in fact, in the US, there's over 4,000 reported ransomware cases each day.
Oh my gosh.
Scary.
Yeah, that's scary.
It's exploding like this. And if you look at the stats, at the amount of ransom a couple of years ago, I think it was 2018, on average, it would be, a few $1,000s in ransom they would get away with, upwards of about $5,000. Today in 2021, if you average out the small and high payouts for ransomware, it's about $200,000. That is a huge increase in just a couple years. And why? Because cyber criminals realize once they get into a small business, medium-sized business, large business, doesn't matter. They're going to ask for as much as they can. And if people keep paying it, it's going to up the ante. And they're greedy. They're in a sense, they're in business to steal our money. So they're going to try to, take as much as they can. And it looks like they're successful, especially when we see some of these payouts. A recent payout, the record payout for ransomware in the US so far is $40 million to an undisclosed company.
Who was this?
Undisclosed. I don't know.
Oh, undisclosed. Okay.
So it was probably a very large company. And they said, our data, whatever it is, it could be IP, it could be personal information, it could be whatever, is so valuable, we're willing to pay $40 million in cryptocurrency just to get the decryption keys back so we can have access to our data and restore things. That to me is scary. That sends a bad signal to the business community, and people are going to quickly sign up for cybersecurity insurance and hope that they'll go in and actually pay for them. And there's a big caution. I should just point out, because I learned this. I do have cybersecurity insurance for my business, but it's very important for small business owners in particular to take the time and sit down with their insurance provider and ask them the questions, what is covered and what's not covered? And what do I need to do to make sure that if I'm a victim, that I will actually be paid the claim that I put in? Because what's starting to happen now is they'll have you check off a bunch of boxes. They'll come and explain, hey, here's all the things that will be covered in your business. Oh, by the way, you have to make sure you're doing all these things. What are some of these things? And everybody kind of, yeah, sure. Of course, I shred all my documents. And of course, I back up things every day. And they're kind of like, well, do they really do that? Probably most companies do not do that. And I think the recent stat I read that more than 40% of all companies' backups, the companies that do back up their data, when they go to use that backup or restore, it doesn't work right because they didn't back it up properly, or there's a configuration issue. There's high percentage of failure. So you're a victim of ransomware attack and you haven't backed up your data in a year. Now you try to find that old backup and upgrade things. It's not compatible. You're out of business. That gets expensive, and it's put companies under just as a result. So I think when you do get that cybersecurity insurance, make sure you go through every item by item and that you do comply. Don't just say, yes, I do back up my data and I use encryption and I shred all my documents. More importantly, make sure that you're doing those. Then you won't have to put a claim in, and then you'll be actually in better shape.
Well, it just occurred to me, if you had flood insurance, right? You have flood insurance, storm is coming, you're by the river, your house is right by the river. You're at the very least going to put sandbags in front of your house. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So are you putting sandbags in front of your business? Are you putting sandbags in front of your data? So my question then is, I have an IT company who I hire, who works with my IT, but will they naturally make sure that I'm protected? Or is that something I should be asking?
I think the answer is probably yes. And I back up a step further and ask, why are you using or outsourcing IT? Probably because you don't have the expertise internally to do it. So to me, that's a better business decision to outsource it, to bring an expert in if that's needed, to set up your computer networks, your email, install, the proper security where need be, physical and cyber. What I do recommend for small business owners to consider, depending upon the size of their business, and again, what do you have? What are your crown jewels? What are you protecting? You get what's called a penetration test or vulnerability assessment. And that's where a third party will come into your company and they'll actually look at everything and they'll try to actively hack in when they're doing a penetration test. So they're going to try to get into your computers, into your network. They're going to try to siphon and steal information. But since you're paying them, they're going to actually sit down with you afterwards and say, okay, Ann, I wanted to sit down and share with you. Here's how we hacked into your computer network. Here's what we were able to steal. Here's where the vulnerabilities are. Now, most important, here's the 3 things, the 10 things, whatever, that you need to do to shore up your company to make sure it's secure from a cybersecurity standpoint, so you won't be a victim of a hack. And that's
a great idea.
Valuable. It's not that expensive. Takes time. It's probably more embarrassing, to be honest. And that's what people are always a little shy. They don't want to tell people, well, we don't properly handle our credit card and destruction, or we don't destroy hard drives properly. We don't recycle batteries properly. We don't, have things encrypted properly, but it's going to force you to do it. So that's sometimes you need to hear the hard talk and somebody to come in and say, hey, you're not doing this right. You're going to be a victim.
Absolutely.
You're going to be a stat unless you start doing these things. And I think that's what's really important. So take the initiative. And the fact that it used to be more of a IT problem, that's changed. And again, that's why I was mentioning I wrote my second book. It's now everybody's business. It's part of your business as a small business owner to be worried about having your business compromised, from being the next stat where you're a victim of ransomware attack.
Absolutely. So I'm going to share an inner secret for our family. We do a lot of movie quotes in our family. One of the quotes that we say a lot is, "Ooh, they died of shame." Because there was a movie, it's a horrible movie. It doesn't matter though. It was a horrible movie, but it was about this bear. And they said, why do most people die in the woods? And he says, they die of shame. Well, same thing. We're so afraid of, whether it's our IT or our accounting, we're so afraid of showing people what we're doing, and that we're not, even though we know we're not doing well, we don't want to show up the experts because we don't want to be embarrassed. Well, then we're going to die of shame. We're going to have a cybersecurity attack of shame, right? So you don't want that. I like that you mentioned that, because it is so important that we think about it.
Yeah. And I think it's so true. And I'll be 100% honest, full disclosure. When my company was targeted and hacked a number of years ago, I didn't want to tell anybody. I said, who's going to want to buy from a company? They focused on security and cybersecurity and wireless expertise, and they were a victim. And what happened, I was actually in New York City at the time. I remember coming off of an interview with Bloomberg, and I was sitting down to have a bite, and my mobile phone rang. I picked it up. It was Associated Press. And they said, hey, we heard that your company was hacked. We want to do a story on this. Would you go on the record and confirm this? And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, no, I must look like an idiot. This is going to affect our business. And then I said, well, wait a second. I said, can I just verify that if I share this with you, I want to share you what happened, my mistakes, but I want to also share some of the things that I learned in the process, so other small business owners will not go through the same problem that I went through. If you're honest and stick to that story, I'll go on the record and do it. So I did. I shared the story, and it really took off. And hence, that's why I wrote the book, Hacked Again, to share with small business owners all the misgivings and misfortunes that I had, but what I learned in the process. And I think that the part that I learned is what's really important for me to keep my company secure, but also sharing that information, helping other small business owners know that you don't have to spend a lot of money. You do have to spend money in the right areas, but you also have to do the basics, the best practices. And that's really what's fundamentally wrong with the majority of small businesses and large businesses throughout America. They're not implementing the best practices, strategies that really don't cost us much. It's just we have to kind of get into that discipline to do them. Once we implement and do it, it's not that hard to do. Just takes time.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you're right. And you said it before. Most people are reusing the same passwords over and over. I think my husband has passwords that he's been using for 25 years. Like, please stop. So, I mean, it's true. It is really true. All right, I want to move on to something that happens a lot. It happens, gosh, I probably hear about it once a week from friends who say, "Oh, my credit card number was stolen at a gas station." How do we avoid that?
Yeah, well, huge problem, first of all. In fact, it's a multi-billion-dollar criminal enterprise that's targeting just the United States. And it's probably good to understand, why does it keep happening? Well, first and foremost, take your credit card out of your wallet or your purse and look at the back of it. Do you have a mag stripe on it? And 99.9% of everybody in the US is going to say, well, yeah, but I have chip and pin, Scott, so I'm secure. Stop. Because you got to think about this. How are they taking your credit card information? It's off the mag stripe. So when your card gets inserted, either by the attendant or yourself to pay gas, when that goes into the credit card reader, there's a second read head that's put in there that will read the CVV information. All that information, your credit card number, expiration date, so on and so forth, on your credit card. They'll still allow the transaction to go through. You pump your gas, you pay the bill, and you move on. Unbeknownst to you, they got a copy of your credit card. So that's what we need to realize. The question probably that's in everybody's head was, well, wait a second, how do you get a second read head inside of a gas pump? The story gets even better. There's about 6 keys throughout the United States, generic keys, that open up the majority, 80+% of all gas pumps.
Oh my gosh.
Why the heck would you do that? It's kind of like having a generic key on everybody's house. That's exactly what it's like. Well, that's because when the tanker truck backs up and there's a problem, he has to get into the machine. When somebody has to load paper in the machine and it jams for printing out the credit card receipt. When national weights and measures come in and has to make sure that the machine is accurately dispensing the right amount that correlates to what the transaction says on the screen. When the attendant is there or he changed shifts. So many people need to access machines that have these generic keys. I can go on eBay for $15 and buy 6 of these keys. And I can have access to more than 80% of all the gas pumps across the nation. So once I have this magic key, I can go up to any gas pump. I'll usually, if I was a cyber criminal, I'm speaking hypothetically, I would go in at night, open the machine up, and I would take what's called a Bluetooth skimmer. And I would stick that inside the rat's nest of wires, and conveniently on top of where the point of sale terminal, where it reads the credit card, the mag stripe, I plug into a Molex connector. I close the door. It takes me 15 seconds to do that. I'm in business. So I place this Bluetooth skimmer one time inside the machine, and you could buy them on the dark web for anywhere. I've seen them from $600 to about $1,300 for a Bluetooth skimmer. It probably costs in parts about $20 to actually make it, but they're sold by these cyber criminal gangs. The beauty of it is, from a criminal's perspective, you go to the crime scene once, you place your device, 15 seconds, and you're gone. That's scary, because now they simply drive up in a car 75 feet away with a laptop, and now they can download hundreds of stolen credit cards each and every day from each and every pump. But the customer never knows it. And then a week later, a month later, a year later, they say, what happened? My credit card was compromised. Why? Because the cyber criminals taking those credit cards, and they usually get a few hundred per day per pump. So now you're talking thousands or 10,000s over the course of a couple of weeks. They put them into a database and they sell them on the dark web, and they may get 50 cents to $1 per stolen credit card that other cyber criminals will now use and go buy merchandise on the web or whatever the case may be. They also oftentimes will burn a fresh credit card. And the scam that's going around, and this kind of shows you how organized it is. Cyber thief puts Bluetooth skimmer into the gas pump. And now what they'll do is they'll come back later on with your stolen credit card burned on a fresh card, they call it. They'll put it into the pump, and now they'll buy 300 to 400 gallons of gas, and they'll have it in the back of a pickup truck with a large bladder on it, or a large bladder inside there with a cap over it. If you've ever seen those pickup trucks with the cab on the back there, pump in a couple hundred gallons. Now they'll drive around the corner. They'll meet up with a large tanker truck that will then hook up a pump. They'll pump that stolen gas from your credit card, my credit card, into the tanker truck. That tanker truck drives around the block back to the gas station, sells that stolen gas back to the same gas station. So you see the circle pattern that's going on, and now you're talking thousands and thousands of dollars, and this is happening every single day, day in, day out, day in, day out. why is the problem happen? The bigger picture, when you look at the issuing bank and you look at the petroleum industry, they didn't want to spend the money to upgrade all of the millions of gas pumps in the United States because it is expensive. So
Right.
they never converted to true chip and pin technology. They've just used magstripe. So the law last October 2020 mandated that they have to start doing it. Otherwise, there's actually a liability shift that will go down to the issue from the issuing credit card company down to the actual gas station. So now the petroleum industry is saying, all right, let's start spending the money and upgrading things so it can get safer, safer, safer. Big
All
news.
right. So the tip, I guess, is to first of all pay attention to which gas stations you're stopping at and make sure they have the. I'm guessing the tap technology is the best technology because you're not putting it into that magnet.
Yeah, yes and no. It's not readily available. The tip on this one is probably not one that you or anybody else wants to hear, but my big cyber tip is old school, pay cash. Cash is king at the pump. You can't get scammed. Since you can't look in that pump, you can't see if there's a second read head easily. It's difficult.
Right.
We've actually developed tools that can determine if there is a Bluetooth skimmer inside the pump. We have a direction finding tool that actually hunts it down. And then we have a physical tool we stick down the neck of the gas pump. It's called Skim Scan. And it's about $300. It's a very simple tool. This is used by law enforcement, FBI, Sheriff's Office, National Weights and Measures, Secret Service, and different groups in the petroleum industry to rid all of these skimmers out of gas pumps. But I'll be 100% honest, as fast as our tools are finding the skimmers and they're being pulled out, sometimes the next day there's another skimmer placed. So
Yeah, it makes sense.
Huge problem. And it's hard to track down the cyber criminals and stop it. That's a big concern.
Yeah, that it is. It's really scary. And I've had it happen to me.
Mhm.
So, and actually, I think every person who's worked in my office has had it happen to them. So it is very, very scary.
Yeah.
It really is. I don't even know how the credit card companies stay and how they keep employees, because I get so many phone calls saying, did you use your card here? And if that's just me,
Yeah.
it has to be so many.
Yeah, well, approximately 4% of the interest charged on a credit card. So say somebody has a credit card and they're paying, I don't know, 18% interest. 4% of that is spent just toward fighting all the cyber crime. So in essence, we are paying for cyber crime. We're kind of funding it indirectly just in these high interest payments. So if at all possible, right here and now, until there's tap to pay or Apple Pay or Google Wallet, more secure payment methods, or chip and pin is properly implemented at the pump, I would use cash wherever possible. Maybe the exception is if you go to one gas station, you know the attendant, you've never had problems there, and you stick with that, you're obviously going to be a much more secure there, because there's a level of confidence there. Whereas if you're traveling, especially on highways going state to state at the rest stops, they really target those where you see sometimes 30 gas pumps and they're all spread out, especially the pumps furthest away from where an attendant might be or from where the cameras see. That's where they typically will place the skimmer. So if you are traveling, you have no choice, you don't have cash and you got to use credit card, use the pumps that are closest to the cameras and the attendant to minimize the risk. But it's still a risk. You just got to weigh that in.
Still a risk. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. That was really, really helpful. And it explained something I just didn't know. So I really appreciate that. All right. Tell people they can reach you at bvsystems.com.
Yeah.
How else might they find you?
I also have a website that I focus more on some of the cybersecurity tips, and I post that on there. You could freely download it. There's a series of blogs. There's 1,000+ videos I've got up there. All of that you can download for free. And that's simply my name, scottschober.com. They can go there. And I do actually respond as a real person, not a bot or anything else. You can go there. And if you have a question and you need some advice, I'm happy to share that. I don't charge any money for that. And I do get people pretty much daily now that will reach out to me and ask me questions. And what product do I use here? What do I recommend for this or that? And I'm happy to share that information with you there just to keep you safe. And then, of course, the 3 books I have are Hacked Again, Cybersecurity is Everybody's Business, and Senior Cyber. That could easily be located on Amazon. Just type that into the search there. And
that's great.
Browse.
We'll add those to the show notes as well, because I think it's so important for people to be able to find it. Also, I did see, and I meant to ask you that, and we're out of time, so I'm going to direct people over to your website. You had either an article or a video about Biden offering a $10 million, not ransom, that's not the right word, reward on hackers.
This was an interview I just did the other day, and it's really what the Biden administration is actually paying people $10 million to help if you can provide a tip that can prevent a ransomware attack. So it's kind of like, I likened it to a bug bounty in a sense where, big tech giants will pay you if you find vulnerabilities. The government's kind of doing that and saying, hey, if you could find cyber criminals that are lurking in the dark web or doing things that are wrong, and you could report it to law enforcement and the government, you're going to get up to $10 million in a reward. So it's kind of a backwards thinking a little bit, but I think it's kind of neat because what they're trying to do is bring together public and private together so there's communication between the government and the private sector. So small business owners, listen to that. That's important for you to not only report if you're a victim of any cyber crime. They provide, and it's called Stop Ransomware, I think is the website that they reference. A lot of great articles and tips on there that you could do it, but it shows you who to report the information to if you feel you're a victim, and some of the best practices that you can implement as a small business owner so you're not the victim of ransomware. So I love to see the fact the government is starting to step up to it and make a difference, and that's going to help in the long run.
Well, this last one with the oil pipeline, right? Yeah. With the pipeline, that one changed the way things were working in our whole economy. Changed the entire economy. It was a very scary. It was a very scary.
And again, there's another example, and we go back to what was the vulnerability or the weakness there in Colonial Pipeline. They were using a VPN, virtual private network, but they used a weak password that allowed somebody access to it. And look at the catastrophic events that unfolded after that. And fortunately, they did something good in Colonial Pipeline. Right away, they shared the digital wallet ID with law enforcement so they could start tracking and look at the general ledger out there of all the crypto movement for Bitcoin until they could hone in and saw large transactions and movements move to 6 different accounts, and they could recover most of that Bitcoin, which is pretty amazing.
Oh, that's great. That is really great. That's amazing. So, well, you've scared the bejeebers out of me, I'm going to be honest. But I think it was really, really helpful. I know our listeners are going to think it was helpful. So thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it. Sure. Everybody else, we'll be back next week. We'll see you Monday. And if you have questions in the meantime, send them on on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, and we will get them to Scott, and he can answer them for you. So we really do appreciate that we have guests who are answering questions. It makes a difference. Scott, thank you so much for coming. This was really, really great. Scary, but really great.
Great. Hey, thanks for having me, and everybody stay safe out there.
That sounds great. You stick around 1 minute, and we'll see everybody else next week. Bye-bye.